The cut opened on the crate's iron strap before Wren Marlowe even felt it, and her blood was already on the lid when the first glyph lit. She had been prying at the hasp with a glazier's knife, the same knife she used 6 days a week to lift gold leaf off cracked shop signs because the probate assessor had said the crate was going to the smelter with the rest of the unclaimed freight, and because it was the only thing in her mother's estate that still had her mother's handwriting on it. The blade slipped. The strap bit the meat of her palm. 3 drops went into the seam where the lock had defeated 2 locksmiths, a cutting torch, and a Moorhaven customs auditor with a court order. The seam drank them. That was the only word for it. The dark line where lid met body pulled the blood in the way dry ground pulls rain, and a character she had never seen in 24 years of restoring lettering for a living kindled along the strap. A small angular mark, the color of a banked coal, glowing through solid iron as if iron were lampshade paper. A second mark woke beside it, then a row of them, running away from her hand around the crate's shoulder, each one igniting the next, quick and quiet, like someone walking through a dark house turning on lights they knew by heart. The lock that had refused everyone on the planet opened with a sound softer than a held breath. Wren did not step back. She would think about that later, that her body's first vote, with her hand bleeding and a dead woman's crate unsealing itself in a cold attic, had been to lean closer. She lifted the lid. Folded on top, alone, sat a chart on heavy cloth-backed stock. She knew her mother's drafting hand the way she knew her own face. The hard, clean coastlines, the fussy little compass stars Ada Marlowe drew in the corners of everything, even grocery lists. But the chart was wrong in a way that made the attic feel suddenly very small. It showed a route, a chain of marks crossing 3-star systems Wren half recognized and one she didn't, and the route was moving, not flickering, redrawing. A line of the same coal-colored fire crept across the cloth as she watched, correcting itself the way a road corrects when the rider takes a turn. She put her unhurt hand flat on it. The chart was warm. Not attic warm, not trapped summer air warm. Warm like bread, warm like something that had been held against a living body until a moment ago. Her mother had been declared dead 14 months past. The expedition she'd wrecked her reputation on. The Tellurin survey, the one the boards and the bondsmen and the news feeds agreed she had botched so badly that 4 ships in her own name went down with it, had gone silent 3 years before that. The warmth did not care about any of those dates. Below the chart lay a field journal with a cracked spine, a hand lamp of old black brass with no fuel cell and no socket for one, and a flat iron token the size of her palm stamped with the same angular character that had lit first on the strap. Under all of it, lining the crate's floor, someone had written one line in chalk in her mother's hand, the letters worn but deliberate. Blood finds you. It does not admit you. Downstairs, the front bell rang. Wren stood very still in the attic of Crane House with her hand bleeding and her heart going hard, and listened to the assessor's voice greet somebody at the door, and then heard the assessor's voice change. It went up half a register and got fast and polite, the voice Moorhaven people used on off-world money. A second voice answered. It was deep and even and had the faint clipped buzz of a translator collar doing its work, and it said pleasantly that the buyers had come about the Marlowe freight. There were no buyers. The estate had been listed 9 weeks. Nobody bought the debts of a disgraced surveyor. Wren had signed the papers acknowledging exactly that on Tuesday. She looked down at the chart still redrawing itself by its own quiet fire, and the chalk line and her blood drying on the strap, and she did the arithmetic her mother had apparently trusted her to do. A lock no one could force had opened for her at sundown, and strangers with a translator collar were at the door before full dark. The crate had told someone it was open. Wren moved. She rolled the chart, jammed it with the journal and the lamp and the token into her canvas tool satchel on top of knives and gold leaf books, and she was easing the attic ladder down when the stairwell below filled with the sound of boots that were trying to be quiet and were too heavy to manage it. Miss Marlowe is here somewhere, the assessor was saying, eager, 2 floors down. She'll confirm the inventory. Miss Marlowe? 3 flights below, through the banister gaps, she saw them come into the lamplight of the second landing. 2 wore the gray quilted coats of off-world crews everywhere. The third had to stoop under the landing arch, a head and a half taller than a tall man, plated at the jaw and crown in segmented slate-colored chitin, eyes set wide and amber and patient. The plated one carried nothing and touched nothing. The 2 in gray carried cases too slim for tools and too long for paperwork, and the one in front had a strip of fresh white sealant on his neck, and Wren had grown up on a freight colony and knew what a holstered shock lance rig looked like under a coat. Inventory straightforward, one of the gray coats said below. 1 crate, contents unsorted. We'll want the daughter present for the unsealing. Combines particular about provenance. Combine. The plated one lifted its head unhurried and looked up the stairwell, not at her, She was flat to the attic floor by then with her cheek on dusty boards, but at the air the way a thing smells weather. "The seal is already broken," it said in that even buzzing voice. "Within the hour the resonance is still settling." A pause and then, with what would have sounded like warmth from anything else, "She's in the house." Ren stopped breathing for 1 second. She went out the attic gable the way she had at 15, when being grounded had been the worst trouble the universe owned, over the slates, down the kitchen wing roof on her seat, off the cistern, into the bramble lane behind Crane House. She tore her sleeve. She kept the satchel against her chest the whole way, the warmth of the chart bleeding through the canvas like a coal wrapped in cloth, and she ran for the only person on Moorhaven her mother had ever called a friend. Sepha Oran was under her own freighter with a fault light burning when Ren came up the ramp bleeding and out of breath, and to her lifelong credit she listened to the whole thing, crate, blood, glyphs, warm chart, combine, without once saying that's impossible. She climbed out from under the lifter housing, wiped her hands and said something worse. "Show me the mark on the token." Ren showed her. Sepha Oran, who had flown ore and mail and quarantine vaccine through 3 systems for 30 years, who had carried Ada Marlowe's survey gear on credit when no licensed line would touch her cargo, looked at a piece of stamped iron the size of a biscuit and aged 10 years standing up. "I carried freight for your mother for half my life," she said. "Twice she paid me in coin that had that mark on it, and both times she made me promise to spend it off-world. And the last time I saw her, 8 days before the Telleran survey lifted, she stood right where you're standing and told me that if it ever fell apart, everything she actually was would come to you through the house." "Through the house," she said, "not through the will." Sepha's jaw worked. "I thought she meant money. I thought she'd buried money." "What was she?" Ren said. Her voice came out scraped. "Sepha. The feed said she got 4 ships worth of people killed chasing salvage that didn't exist. I spent 3 years learning to say nothing when clients brought her up." "What was she?" "I don't know. I know what she wasn't, which is careless." Sepha looked at the chart then, unrolled across her chart table between coffee rings, redrawing its slow, fiery line. The route's first mark sat over a world named in her mother's smallest lettering. Dross, the Lantern Archive. Ask for the registrar. The line crawled toward it as they watched, then stopped and pulsed like a finger tapping a map twice. "Here, then here." "That's 2 jumps," Sepha said. "Dross is a scrap report now. The archive district burned in the spoil wars. Nobody rebuilt it." She glanced at the fault light still blinking on her board, killed it with a thumb, and made the decision in the time it took to do that. "I can have us off the pad in 40 minutes if you don't mind lifting heavy." "Sepha, the ones at the house." The tall one knew the seal was broken before anyone could have told it. It said resonance. "Then they can hear the thing, or they can hear something near it, and 40 minutes is 39 too many." Sepha was already moving, locking down the table, kicking chocks toward the ramp winch. "There's gauze in the galley, wrap that hand. Bleeding on 1 artifact a day is plenty." They lifted out of Moorhaven into a wet headwind, and Ren sat in the jump seat with the journal open on her knees and her mother's cipher staring up at her, pages and pages of it, columns of those angular coal glyphs broken by ordinary numbers, and found on the inside cover the only passage written in plain script. It was addressed to no one. Her mother had been too careful to write a name even there. "If this is open, then I am gone, and the blood door found you, and I am sorry. I built that door praying it would rust shut unused. Understand what you are holding before you decide. The chart goes where it goes. The lamp will not light yet. The token will not speak to you yet. None of it is treasure and none of it is yours. It is a road and a road is a duty, and our family has no claim on it that you do not earn with your own 2 feet. They will tell you it runs in the blood. It has never once run in the blood. Go to the registrar, pay what it asks, and if at any point you find that you cannot go on, then stop and live, and know that stopping was allowed." Below that, smaller, the pen pressed hard enough to score the paper. "But if you are anything like the girl who climbed the cistern at 15, you will not stop. And God help me, that is the only thing I have ever counted on." Ren read it 4 times while the freighter climbed. The 4th time, she realized she was not crying for grief exactly. Her mother had known. All 3 years of silence, all the shame, the sold furniture, the clients lowering their voices. Her mother had been out here in it, doing something with her whole self, and had rigged a lock so that the truth would come to her daughter and to nobody else in the galaxy, and had still, in chalk, given her permission to walk away. Permission to walk away was the one thing the Marlows had never used. "Strap in," Sepha called back, "and put the satchel in the smuggle box under deck plate 9, because we are not alone." The Combine Corvette hung off Moorhaven's traffic ring with its transponder politely on, broadcasting a salvage survey registry under the name Greywake Combine, Assay Division, and it did not chase them, which was its own kind of message. It logged them. Ren watched its sensor lamps track the freighter all the way to the jump shoal the way the plated broker's amber eyes had tracked. The empty stairwell. Patient, particular about provenance. They want me to lead them, she said. Course they do. A blood-keyed lock just told them the Marlowe line is live and moving. Cepha put the bow on the shoal, so we'll be rude. I know a back way into Dross that the assay boys won't have on file, because the man who dug it has been dead 30 years and owed me money. The freighter went into jump with a shudder, and Ren did not sleep. She sat with the chart spread under the cabin's red nightlight and watched the warm line creep, and somewhere past the middle of the night she noticed what it crept past. Tiny marks dotted along the route, dozens of them, drawn and then struck through. Each strike-through was annotated in her mother's microscopic hand. Burned 09, burned 11. False sold to the Combine 11. They paid twice. Collapsed, cost me the Weston bond. Burned 12. Gave them Tellerin. Gave them Tellerin. The expedition that had destroyed Ada Marlowe's name had a strike-through and 4 words. And the 4 words said her mother had aimed the disaster. Fed the Combine a route to nothing, burned the real road behind her, and paid for it with 4 ships' insurance bonds, a court docket, and a daughter who had learned to flinch at her own surname. Ren put her bandaged hand flat on the warm cloth, over the struck-through marks, over 3 years of her mother dying in public on purpose, and she said it out loud alone, 'cause somebody finally should. You didn't fail anything. The chart pulsed under her palm twice, like a finger tapping. Here, then here. Dross from orbit was the color of old scar tissue, a dry world mind past caring, its one city pooled in a canyon like something spilled. The Lantern Archive District was a black square in the city's heart, visible from altitude. 10 streets of burned roof beams kept fenced off by a municipality too poor to clear them and too superstitious to sell the stone. Cepha's back way in was a service shaft behind a dye works, and it put them out at dusk on a street where the fire had stopped exactly halfway. On the left, lit windows, cook smoke, a tool stall closing up. On the right, ruined facades freestanding against the sky, doorways into rooms of ash. And over the whole district, a silence that the market noise behind them seemed to agree not to enter. The archive itself still had its steps. Wide black stone, 40 of them swept clean. Swept. Ren stopped at the bottom with her satchel strap in both hands and looked at the broom marks. Still visible in the evening grit, going up, recent, and felt the hair on her arms rise, because somebody kept this. In a fenced-off ruin in a scrapper city, somebody swept 40 steps the way you only sweep something you expect a guest to climb. Ask for the registrar, she said. I'll mind the street, Cepha said quietly, and put her back to a scorched pillar with her coat open, and looked, suddenly, much less like a freight hauler. Ren climbed. The doors at the top were gone, burned or salvaged, but the doorway was not empty. A chain hung across it, old iron, and from the chain hung a slate, and on the slate in chalk in 5 languages, including hers. The archive is closed. The registrar sees petitioners who bring what they cannot read. Ren took out the field journal her mother had filled with a cipher she could not read 1 word of, and held it up to the empty doorway, feeling foolish for half a second. The chain unhooked itself on the left side and slid down to hang straight, the way a curtain is held aside by an usher's hand, and from somewhere far inside the burned hall a voice rolled out, dry and vast and amused, a voice like the largest book in the world clearing its throat. A Marlowe, the registrar said. Come in off the street, petitioner. You're late and you're bleeding, and you have brought half the trouble in this arm of the sky down on my 40 clean steps. Your mother said you would. Inside the ruined hall, in the last gray daylight falling through the burned-out roof, glyphs began to ignite along the spines of 10,000 fused books, coal-colored. 1 shelf at a time, quick and quiet, like someone walking through a dark house turning on lights they knew by heart. The Lantern Archive had burned so hot in the Spoil Wars that its books had become geology. Whole stacks stood fused into glassy black monoliths, page edges visible in cross-section like sediment, and it was along these dead spines that the glyphs now ran, lighting aisle after aisle deeper into the dark. The light was not for show. It was a path. It went somewhere, and it dimmed behind her as she passed, which told Ren the registrar saw no reason to light a road twice. She found squatters before she found the registrar, except squatters was the wrong word the moment she saw them. 5 aliens in patched scholars' shawls were camped in the lee of a fallen gallery, narrow gray-skinned people with too many finger joints, and they were not living in the ruin so much as working it. Trestle tables, brushes, trays of black glass fragments laid out on cloth in careful grids, each fragment tagged. The eldest of them rose when Ren's pathlight reached their camp, looked at the lit shelves, looked at her, and made a deep, slow bow that had nothing of mockery in it. It lights for almost no one, the elder said in careful trade tongue. We have been copying what the fire spared for 9 years, and it has lit for the Veshit twice. Walk well, petitioner. What is it? Ren asked. The registrar. Please, I'm walking into this blind. The archive's own keeper. Older than the building. The building was raised around it, you understand, not it installed in the building. The elder's many-jointed hands folded. It does not lie, it does not haggle twice, and it does not forgive being lied to. Whatever price it names, pay it whole. The path of burning spines ended at the heart of the ruin where the roof had held. Here the stacks rose intact into darkness, and between them stood a desk. It was the size of a barge. Black iron, scarred by heat, its top a single slab, and standing in the slab, fused into it to the waist as if the iron had been poured around them, was a figure. Human-shaped, perhaps, under centuries. The fire had taken any face it ever had and left a smooth pitted oval that nonetheless turned to follow her, and when it spoke, the voice came not from the figure but from the whole room, from the shelves, from the floor, dry and vast. Put the journal on the desk. Ren put it down. The iron figure did not move its fused arms. It did not need to. The journal opened itself, and the pages turned in a wind that touched nothing else. Fast, faster, the whole book in the time it took her to breathe twice. The cold glyphs of her mother's cipher rose off the pages as they turned, actually rose, hanging in the air in drifting constellations of ember light, and the registrar read them the way weather reads a field. Ada Marlowe's working cipher, it said, 17 years of it, root ledgers, burn logs, purchase records for 11 false charts sold to the Greywake Combine at ruinous prices. Ruinous to them, she had a gift, bond transfers. A list of names she paid pensions to in secret, families of the Telleran crews. That list is longer than the public casualty roll, petitioner, because the public roll was also hers, and she padded it to let 4 bondsmen disappear from their debts, and the last entry. The drifting glyphs stilled. The last entry is a request addressed to me, dated 5 days before she died. Ren's hands had gone cold around the satchel strap. You knew her. I registered her. Something in the dry voice shifted 1 degree toward what might have been respect. 41 times she climbed my steps. The first time she was younger than you and bleeding worse, and she could not read 1 word of what she carried either. I will tell you what I told her. The Lantern Archive keeps the records of the Emberline, and the Emberline is not a family, not a guild, not a faith. It is a relay. A line of hands that has carried one duty since before this city had a name, and every hand in it was chosen the same way. Not found. Chosen. Do you know how doors like me choose, petitioner? Your mother's chalk was accurate. Blood finds you, Ren said slowly. It does not admit you. Blood is an address, the registrar said. Nothing more. A blood door is a courier with your name on its satchel. It can find the last keeper's kin because kin is findable, and that is the whole of what your lineage has ever been worth to the Emberline. You were findable. Every other door on the road is deed-keyed. They open to what a person does standing in front of them, and they have refused princes, and they would have refused your mother's own mother, who was, the record shows, a coward of considerable accomplishment. The faceless oval tilted. The Combine believes otherwise. The Combine has believed for 60 years that the road runs in the Marlowe blood, because blood is a thing the Combine can buy, draw, store, and own, and the alternative is a thing they cannot. Your mother spent the last 17 years of her life keeping them believing it. Her masterpiece. And the cost of it stands in front of me with her hand wrapped in galley gauze, so I ask formally, as I am bound to ask, do you wish to take up the petition, knowing the last petitioner died of it? The hall was very quiet. Far off, where the lit path had gone dark, Ren could hear the Vachette scholar's brushes, fine as rain. Tell me what she was protecting first, she said. I won't carry a thing I haven't looked at. She taught me that, restoring signs. You don't gild over rot. The room made a sound she would have sworn was a laugh, if barges laughed. 42 times someone has stood there and been asked that question, the registrar said. 41 of them asked what they would be paid, what they would command, or what would happen to them if they refused. You are the first to ask what the freight is. Mark it down, petitioner. That question just paid half your toll. The glyph constellation reformed in the air between them and became a picture. A ring of standing stones on a steppe under a hard sky, except the scale was wrong. The stones were the size of grain towers, and between them the ground swelled like a buried hill. Then the picture cut away, down through soil and bedrock, into the hill that was not a hill, and Ren was looking at a machine the size of a drowned city. Furnace was the word her mind reached for, and the word the glyphs confirmed, written in her mother's cipher beneath the image. But it was a furnace the way a sun is a campfire. Vast feed throats, casting floors a mile long. Cradles holding half-born shapes, hull ribs, habitat rings, soil frames, abandoned mid-pour and held in stasis like patience on a table. The Sundermark, the registrar said, the last working seed forge of the long settlement. The engine that poured the colony arcs. Petitioner, when your species and mine were younger, it can cast a city in a season. It can knit a dead world soil. And in the spoil wars for 11 days, it was held by men who used it the other way, and what it cast in those 11 days unmade 3 worlds, one of which you walked across this evening. This city is not poor because its mines failed. This city is poor because the Sundermark spent 11 days as a weapon 2 systems away, and Dross was downwind of the war it fed. The Emberline took it back at a cost that is recorded on 400 shelves of this archive, sealed it behind a deed door no force has ever opened, and has spent the generations since doing the only thing that actually keeps a thing like that, closed. The faceless figure leaned, fractionally the iron groaning, not guarding it. You cannot garrison forever. Garrisons are bought, starve, die, or grow proud, no. The Emberline keeps the road to it unfindable, and keeps the kind of person who could open it walking that road, so that when the wrong hands come, and they always come, there is someone standing on the right spot who has already decided what their life is for. Your mother stood on that spot longer than anyone since the wars. The Combine never got within a system of the ring while she lived. They are within a system of it now, because the blood door at Crane House announced her death and her daughter's address in the same breath, and that, petitioner, was the one flaw in her masterpiece. She could not bring herself to let the road forget her family entirely. The record says she tried 4 times to cut you out of the relay and lock the crate to no one. The record says she sat in this hall and could not order it done. Ren looked at the drifting ember image of the buried forge, and the strike marks of a 17-year war her mother had fought alone and lost. Everything but the war itself, and she understood finally and completely what she had inherited. Not a road, not a relic, a post. The Combine took 12 vials, she said quietly. The constellation snuffed. The hall went 1 shade darker. Say that again, the registrar said, carefully. Yesterday, before we reached you, Cepha's backway put us down a day out. We overnighted in the dye works district. Her bandaged hand curled. 4 of them came over the wall of the boarding yard at dusk. Gray coats, S.A. Kit. They were fast, and they were polite, and that was the worst part. They didn't want me. They held my arms, apologized for the inconvenience, and drew blood like an orbital customs clinic. 12 vials. Sealed each one in front of me with the Combine's own assay stamp like they were proving a vintage, and the one with the sealant on his neck said, "The Combine thanks the Marlowe line for its contribution," and they went back over the wall. Cepha broke one of their wrists, and it didn't change anyone's manners. She made herself say the rest. They think they've got the key now. That's why no one's kicked in your door behind me. They don't need to follow me anymore. They think the blood is the road. Iron screamed. The registrar's fused figure had turned fully toward her, and every glyph in the hall was burning now, aisle on aisle, the whole dead archive lit like a coal bed blown white. Then you have less time than the record assumed, it said. Hold out your hand, not the cut one. The Emberline does not take blood. We have just established at length what blood is worth. She held out her right hand. From the desk's scarred surface, a drawer that had not existed slid open, and in it lay a piece of iron the size of a knucklebone, rough cast, warm-looking even before she touched it. A second token, twin to her mother's but unworn, its single glyph still sharp from the mold. The ember of petition, the registrar said. Your mother's request, her last entry, was that one be cast for you and held against your coming, against, she wrote, the day the road did to her daughter what it did to her. It is not a key. Understand that to your bones, petitioner. Nothing I give you is a key. The doors ahead are deed doors, everyone, and they will read what you do in front of them, with witnesses' eyes older than this world, and no thing in your satchel will sway them by a feather's weight. The ember is a record. It remembers what you spend along the road, what it costs you, what you give, what you stand for and in front of, and at the last door, it testifies. That is all, and that is everything. The Combine is sailing to the Sundermark with 12 vials of testimony that the wrong family was findable. You will walk there carrying the only kind of evidence the ring has ever once admitted. The ember was warm as the chart had been warm. Ren closed her fist on it and felt absurdly steadier. The way she felt with a knife and leaf in hand at the top of scaffolding, doing the one thing she knew she could do. The toll, she said. You said the question paid half. The other half is paid in freight, as all my tolls are. The archive keeps records. Petitioners add to them. The vast voice slowed, deliberate. You will leave with me the thing you have carried longest that you cannot read, and I do not mean the journal. The journal I have read. It is hers. It stays with you. I mean the message on the back of the chart, the one you have not found yet, because she wrote it in pinpricks under the backing cloth, the way couriers did in the war, and you have not yet held it up to a light behind you. You will find it tonight, and you will want to keep it more than you have ever wanted to keep anything, and the toll is this. I keep the original, and you carry the memory. The road ahead is watched. A pricked message can be taken from a satchel. A remembered one has to be taken from a standing person, and you will learn on this road, petitioner, what it takes to take anything from a standing person. That night, In the Vachette scholars' camp under the held roof, with Sifa asleep against the satchel and the gray-skinned elder grinding ink 2 trestles away, Wren unpicked the chart's backing cloth with her glazier's knife and held the heavy stock up against a work lamp. Pinpricks, hundreds of them, fine as pores, invisible until backlit, and they made letters, and the letters were not cipher. They were plain script, pressed through one pinhole at a time on some nights she could not imagine, in some rooms she would never see. Wren, if you are reading this, then the worst version happened. I am gone, the door found you anyway, and you came because of course you came. So listen to me one last time. Mind the leaf. You used to say it when you taught me to gild. Do you remember? You were 9? You were furious that I'd breathed and torn the gold, and you said mind the leaf. It only tears when you rush. I have thought about that every day of this work. The road ahead will try to make you rush. Grief rushes. Guns rush you worse. But the doors don't read speed, my girl. They read what you do in the 1 second you want to run and don't. That second is the whole inheritance. It's the only thing the Marlowes ever actually passed down, and I got it from watching you on the scaffolds, not the other way around. Walk it slow. Spend the ember well. And when you reach the ring and it asks you, it will ask you in its way, tell it the truth, whatever the truth is that day. It has heard every lie ever invented. It waited this long because somebody kept telling it the truth. All my love, all of it, eh? Wren read it until she could close her eyes and see the pinpricks. Then she carried the chart to the barge-sized desk through the sleeping camp and laid it down and said, take the backing cloth, I have it. Recite it, the registrar said quietly, for a record older than the city, and she did, every word steady until the last line and not entirely steady then, and the iron drawer closed over the pricked cloth like earth closing. Locked, the vast voice said. Now wake your pilot, petitioner. The Combine Corvette made orbit an hour ago, and there is a thing in their manifest broadcast you are going to want to outrun. They have filed a salvage claim on the Sundermark ring. Public, legal, time-stamped. They are not sneaking anymore. They are racing. They came at dawn, and they came up the front steps. Wren was rolling her bedroll in the gray light when the Vachette elder's head lifted. All 5 scholars going still at once like birds before weather, and then she heard it too. Vehicles in the dead district, more than 2, engines pitched low and unhurried. Cepha was already at the doorway gap with one eye to the burned wall. 8, she reported. 2 crawlers, 6 on foot, assay coats, and the tall one. The Greywake Combine entered the Lantern Archive the way it apparently did everything, politely, in good order, and as if the question of permission had been settled somewhere above everyone present. The gray coats fanned through the front hall with scanners and corded seizure tags, the yellow kind that ports stuck on impounded freight. One of them began methodically to tag the Vachette scholars' trestle tables, tray by tray. 9 years of brushwork tagged like scrap. The tall broker stooped under the doorway arch last, straightened, and looked around the glyph-dark hall with his wide amber eyes, and Wren, standing out in the open at the camp, because hiding had stopped being a strategy the moment she'd climbed those steps, watched him find her in half a second and incline his plated head as if they were resuming a conversation. Miss Marlowe, Ilex Var, broker of record, Greywake Combine, Assay Division. The translator collar gave his voice that even, patient buzz. You've been difficult to schedule. You bled me in a boarding yard, Wren said. I'd call that ahead of schedule. Compensation was logged to your name the same hour. Standard donor rates, plus inconvenience. He said it without irony, which was somehow worse than irony, and turned to survey the fused stacks. The Combine holds a registered salvage claim on the structure designated Sundermark and its access architecture. This facility is access architecture. The records here describing the route, the seal, and the operating condition of the asset fall under the claim. We'll take certified copies and the original route ledgers. The scholars will be paid for their cataloging labor at journeyman rates, and everyone will be home by noon, including you if you choose. Your part of this is genuinely finished. The amber eyes came back to her. That is not a threat. It is the pleasant truth. We have the key. The era of keys that have to be persuaded is over. Ours travels in a sample case. You can go back to Gold Leaf, Miss Marlowe. Your mother's debts are even purchasable. The Combine has a sentimental streak about closing accounts. And the terrible thing, Wren thought, was that he meant it. There was no cruelty anywhere in him that she could find. There was only acquisition, wearing patience the way the gray coats wore their guns, as a tool it would prefer not to need. The registrar, she said, isn't going to sell you its books. The registrar is a fixture, Var said, and fixtures convey with the claim. The hall spoke. Do they? Said the registrar from everywhere, in a voice like a ledger of cities closing, and every gray coat in the building put a hand to a weapon at once. What happened next happened fast, and Wren had it played back to her, afterward, more times than she could bear, because the ember on its cord against her sternum had recorded all of it. The gray coat nearest the trestles, young, thorough, with an appraiser's loop pushed up on a strap above two of her 4 eyes, refused an order, quietly. The squad leader with the sealant-striped neck had said tag the originals for transport, meaning the trays of glass fragments, and the young combine appraiser had looked down at 9 years of another people's patient salvage and said, audibly, these aren't claim assets. They're the scholar's own copywork. I won't certify them. The squad leader took the tag gun from her hand without a word, the way you take a tool from an apprentice and turn to do it himself, and the Veshet elder stepped in front of the trays, thin arms folding, and the squad leader's other hand came up with the shock lance, level with the old scholar's chest, casual as pointing at a shelf. Move, grandfather. Afterward, Ren could not honestly tell anyone that she decided. There was no sequence in it she could find, no moment of weighing. There was the lance and the old scholar's folded arms, and the next thing the record showed was her own body standing between them, both hands open and empty at her sides, her heart going like a hammer on stone, her voice coming out to her own astonishment level. He's not moving, she said, and neither am I. So now it's a different morning than the one you planned. Walk it slow. The squad leader's eyes flicked past her shoulder, to Var obviously, for the nod, and Ren watched the lance's charge light burn steady 8 inches from her collarbone, and discovered the strangest thing about the second her mother's pinpricked letters had promised her. It was wide. There was room in it. Room to feel the floor under her feet and the old scholar's breath behind her. Room to be afraid the whole way through and stand there anyway, the fear pouring past like water around a set stone, and in that wide second, low against her breastbone, the ember went warm as a coal. Light bloomed at her hip, the brass hand lamp, the dead lamp, the lamp with no fuel cell and no socket for one, hanging off her satchel where she'd tied it, was lit. A small upright flame the color of every glyph on the road, burning without fuel and without sound inside its old glass, and it threw her shadow forward between the squad leader's boots, 10 feet up the fused stacks. And the lantern archive answered it. Far back in the heart of the ruin, where no door had stood that morning, stone moved. The sound rolled through the floor, not a rumble, a tread, like a single enormous footstep, and down the central aisle every burned shelf lit at once, and where the path of glyphs ended, the back wall of the archive was opening. A door tall enough for the registrar's barge desk to pass through, swinging on hinges that had been part of the masonry an hour ago, and beyond it, descending dark, and shelf light going down and down past counting. The deep stacks, the Veshet elder breathed behind her. 9 years. 9 years it never. Registers noticed, the hall thundered, in 5 languages at once, and tags curled and died on the trestles, every seizure cord snapping its light at the same instant. The root ledgers of the Ember Line are hereby withdrawn to the deep registry, beyond claim, beyond copy, and beyond reach of any party that has drawn a weapon under this roof. The withdrawal is keyed to the petitioner's stand and may not be reversed by the petitioner, by me, or by anyone now living. Greyweight Combine, your assay division is invited to log the following finding. The road does not convey. The great door took the descending lights down with it. Ren actually saw the nearest stacks sink. Whole monoliths of fused records sliding into the floor smooth as pistons, going where guns were never going to follow, and then the door closed, and the wall was a wall, and the hall was just a burned building full of armed people and one small lamp. Elex Var had not moved through any of it. He stood with his hands folded behind him and watched the wall seal the way Ren had once watched a market close early, and then he turned to her with his head tilted, and for the first time the patience in his amber eyes had arithmetic visibly running behind it. Interesting, he said. The fixture spent its leverage to protect paper we no longer need, and you spent yours to protect strangers' copywork. Both of you protecting the wrong asset. The route, Miss Marlowe, is already plotted. My navigators finished the regression an hour after your blood went under the assay scope. Properties in the sample interact with charted resonance. Points, did you know that? Of course you didn't. Your mother did. It's why she salted 3 systems with false resonance for 17 years, and it's why we paid her our compliments by buying every forgery and waiting. He drew on his gloves, finger by finger, unhurried. Stand down, he said to the room, and the lances went away as smoothly as they'd come out. We lift at noon. Squad leader Courser, the appraiser who declined to certify, will surrender her credentials and remain dirtside. The Combine doesn't carry uncertain instruments to a closing. His gaze passed over Ren once more, and something in it had recalculated her. Upward or downward, she couldn't tell, and that frightened her more than the lance had. You may follow us. Of course, he said. It's open sky, and candidly, I hope you do. The Combine hedges, Miss Marlowe. It is what we are. If the key in the sample case proves insufficient, I would rather the spare key were standing somewhere I could see her. He stooped out through the doorway. The gray coats flowed after him in good order, taking nothing, leaving the young, four-eyed appraiser standing in the wreck of her career between trestles, her credential chits scattered at her feet where Courser had stripped and dropped them, lens loop still pushed up on its strap like a question nobody had answered. The crawler engines faded out of the dead district. The Veshit elder began very calmly, straightening the trays. Cepha let out a breath that had been held since the lance came up and said, to the room at large, noon, he means it. That Corvette will burn for Hollis at noon, and it jumps 4 times faster than my boat. Then we're rude again, Wren said. Her hands had started shaking only now that it was over. She watched them do it from a distance, and looked down at the lamp still burning its small, fueled-by-nothing flame, and felt the warmth of the ember through her shirt like a second heartbeat. Registrar, the chart shows 2 more marks before the ring. If he doesn't need the road, do I? He needs the destination, the hall said. You need the road. They are not the same journey, petitioner, and the proof of that is sitting in your satchel burning. The marks are toll houses of the Ember Line. The first lies on Hollis itself, at the gate of the steppe, the Withing House, last kept by your mother. The road through it is the only ground approach to the ring that the herder clans will let armed strangers regret taking. The Combine will land at the ring directly, from orbit because the destination is all they can see. Go by the road. What the road gives you, the ring will read. A pause and the dry vastness gentled by a degree. Your mother walked out of this hall 41 times, and I will tell you what I never told her. I kept count because I was never certain I would see her again, and I find I am repeating the habit. Walk well, Wren Marlowe. The young appraiser caught them at the foot of the 40 steps, four-handed, breathless, carrying her whole life in one duffel. Nim Socha, she said. Appraiser, 4th grade. Formerly, you're flying to Hollis in a boat that can't outrun a tug into a closing operation with 140 personnel, and you don't know what a Combine closing looks like from inside. She planted herself, chin up, all 4 eyes steady, although her hands weren't. I certified 11 of the 17 false charts your mother sold us. I found the flaw in the 12th, and I sat on it for 2 years because the work was beautiful, and I couldn't make myself be the one who killed it. I owe the Marlowe line a debt and the Combine an injury, in whichever order the road wants them. Take me with you. Cepha looked her over. Can you cook? I can assay anything, navigate moderately, forge a manifest, and field strip the model of shock lance every one of those squads carries. Better than cooking, Cepha said, and jerked her thumb up the ramp street toward the dye works. Lift in 20. Somebody decided to give us a head start out of pure professional vanity, and I intend to make him miss it. She nearly did. Cepha Oren flew the 2 jumps to the Hollis Shoal the way other people picked locks, feeling for the worn places. She cut the first transit so close to the shoal's collapse margin that the hull moaned for an hour, and bought them back 6 of the Corvette's 12 hours of advantage, and spent the whole burn between jumps teaching Nim Socha the freighter's failure noises while Wren sat at the chart table and learned her inheritance like a trade, because that was what it turned out to be, a trade. The journal's cipher had begun unlocking itself the night of the archive, whole columns of her mother's coal glyphs resolving into readable script as the ember warmed against her chest, and Wren understood without being told that this was the point of the thing. The record opened as her own record grew, pay matched to pay. What it gave her first were not secrets, they were procedures. How to read the chart's heat against your palm. The line burned warmer toward the living road and cooler over ground gone bad. How to greet the herder clans of the Hollis steppe. Hands shown empty, then one hand to the ground, dust to your own forehead, their ground, your head in that order. How to bank a tollhouse stove, how to splint with stone pine. Page after page in the voice Wren had heard over every kitchen table of her childhood, patient and dry and exact, teaching strangers' hands to carry what her own were about to put down, and somewhere over the second jump Wren stopped reading it as a manual and started hearing it as the longest letter her mother had ever written her. One resolved page held no procedure at all, just a line, dated the year the Telleran story broke. W asked me tonight by relay if the feeds were true. I let the silence answer because the silence was survivable and the truth was not for her yet. A keeper's ledger should record costs honestly. Record. This one is the worst. Wren shut the journal and stood at the cabin port a long time, watching jump light run like water off the hull. And when Nim's reflection appeared beside hers in the plex, she didn't move away. I assayed your blood, Nim said. There was no apology anywhere in her voice. There was something better, accuracy. Vial 9. I should tell you what the Combine actually found, because Var lied to you on the archive floor, politely, by omission, which is the house style. Her 4 eyes ticked between Wren and the dark. The resonance interaction is real. Your blood does answer charted resonance points. Every Marlowe sample on file does, 11 of them going back 2 generations. The Combine has been collecting your family the way it collects everything. But the signal isn't a key signature. I wrote that in my assay notes in 3 places and Watch Commander Courser struck it from the certified copy. It's a beacon response, locator behavior, the exact behavior of the crate that found you on Moorhaven. The samples answer the road the way a sounding answers a bell. They can tell you where the doors are. There is nothing in them, nothing that has ever made one open. Blood finds you, Ren said. It does not admit you. Whoever taught the Combine otherwise, Nim said, spent 60 years teaching it. VAR is flying 140 people and a quarter of the division's annual budget to the Sundermark on the strength of a forged conclusion your mother built out of our own greed, and somewhere underneath all that plating he is beginning to suspect it, which is why he wants you in sight. You're not his spare key, Ren Marlowe. You're his hedge against the dawning possibility that there are no keys. When the vials fail, he will need either a Marlowe to spend or someone to bill for the failure, by preference both. The Hollis Shoal spat them out into a sky the color of hammered tin over a world that was one continent of steppe and weather, and the Combine was already there. Not the Corvette. The Corvette had beaten them by 5 hours and gone on to the ring, a third of the way around the planet's curve. What was waiting at the shoal exit was a picket. 2 interdiction tugs flying assay division colors, parked exactly where a freighter making for the steppe gate would want its descent corridor, broadcasting a navigational safety advisory on the public band. Advisory, Cepha said, reading it, and laughed once, without any humor at all. They've declared our landing zone an active salvage hazard. If I put down inside their claim cordon, they impound the boat and intern us, all legal, all polite. If I put down outside it, she dragged the cordon overlay across the chart, and the green line swallowed the Withing House and 400 kilometers of steppe around it, there is no outside it within walking distance of water. How fresh is the cordon filing? Nim asked, already pulling the registry on her board. 2 hours. Then it's Courser's work. VAR's aboard the Corvette. Nim's hands moved all 4. Combining cordons have a hole. It's structural. They can't fix it. Emergency set down. Article 9 of every salvage code they file under, a vessel declaring mechanical distress may make one uncontested landing inside a cordon and may not be interdicted, only inspected after the fact. The boat has to be genuinely unflyable when the inspectors reach it, or it's fraud and they own you. She looked up. How attached are you to flying home? The cabin went quiet. The freighter was Cepha Oren's house. Pension and biography. Ren had known the smell of its galley since she was 6 years old. Cepha looked around the flight deck once, the way you look around a room you are leaving, and then she did the thing Ren never managed to forgive the road for, and never managed to stop loving her for either, which was to grin. Ren, your mother stood in this exact deck light 18 years ago and told me that someday the road would ask me for the boat, and I told her the road could get in line behind the bank. She buckled in. Strap. We're about to have a real failure because I don't do fraud. She put the freighter down on the step inside the cordon with the port lifter, genuinely dead. She had Nim pull its governor core mid-descent and threw the dying engine's last thrust sideways in a slewing, screaming, dust-walling arrival that was half landing and half lesson, and when the boat finally stopped sliding, nose down in the bunch grass with its keel plating peeled like fruit, she powered down, patted the console twice, and said, there, unflyable, Your Honor. The Withing House stood 11 kilometers north, and they walked it before the Combine inspector's skiff was even fueled. It rose out of the steppe the way the best human buildings did, looking grown rather than built. A long low hall of dry-laid stone with a tower at one end, a windbreak of stacked sod, a stock tank, a porch deep enough to sleep a caravan. 200 years of keepers had cut their marks into the lintel stone. The last mark was newer than the rest. The cut still bright, and it was 2 letters. AM. The door was deed-keyed, and the door was the first thing on the road that refused her. Ren put her hand on the iron pull, and the cold came up through it like the cold off. Deep water, not locked, worse than locked, indifferent, and the single glyph above the lintel stayed dark. The ember lay quiet against her chest. The lamp at her hip burned its small flame unchanged. Nothing about her, the door's silence said, had yet happened here. It doesn't know you, Nim said quietly, reading the lintel. Or it knows exactly who you are, and that's the point. Kin gets found. Kin doesn't get admitted. They camped on the tollhouse porch like petitioners, which Ren understood by then was precisely what they were, and the steppe taught them its arithmetic the first night. The temperature fell off a cliff at dusk, the wind came over the grass like a tide, and far off to the north, bedded in the dark, a sound rolled to them once, long, low, struck rather than blown, a tone Ren felt in the porch stones under her. Not thunder, too regular for thunder. The ring, Nim said, 4 eyes on the north horizon. They've started cutting. The herders arrived the second morning, and the Combine's inspectors arrived an hour behind them, and what happened in between decided everything after. although Wren didn't know it then. The herders came up the old road with the sun behind them. 40 saddle beasts, 6 high-wheeled wagons. The Steppe clan whose families had tended the outer stones of the Sundermark since before anyone's records but the registrar's. Their headwoman was named Kath Irel, iron-haired sun-cut, with a surveyor's eye and no patience for ceremony she hadn't tested first. She swung down, watched Wren show empty hands, touch the ground and bring dust to her own forehead in the right order. There ground, her head, and grunted as if a sum had come out even. Ada's girl, you move like her. Same wrong-footed at the greeting, same doing it anyway. Then, without softening at all, which Wren came to learn was the clan's way of being gentle, she died on our ground 3 seasons back. South porch of the ring, the dawn side. We buried her where she fell because she asked us to, and we cut no name in the stone because she asked that too. You'll want taking there. Wren's voice didn't work on the first try, yes. After the weather, Kath Irel said, eyes already gone past her to the southern sky, and that was the whole of the clan's condolence, and somehow it was enough, because it assumed she was strong enough to wait for it. Dust front coming, a bad one. Get your gear into the lee of the house. Porch will flood with grit by midnight. We'll wall the wagons. Your dead boat is about to bury itself, and so is anyone flying in it. Anyone flying in it. The Combine inspection skiff was at that moment a glittering speck dropping out of the southern haze, 6 souls aboard per its own broadcast manifest, on a straight-line course for the wreck, a course that would put it across the front's leading edge inside 40 minutes. Nim was on the handset in 3 steps, broadcasting in the clear on the Combine's own working channel. Assay flight, abort inspection, weather abort. The reply came back in Watch Commander Courser's voice, flat with procedure and contempt. Combine flight operations do not take meteorological direction from claim jumpers. Continue as filed. The front hit the skiff 70 kilometers south of the Withing House, and the steppe swallowed its mayday in static. What Wren remembered afterward of the next 6 hours came in pieces. The dust arriving not as wind but as a wall, the daylight going the color of tea, then the color of nothing. Kath Irel's voice rasping that the clan didn't ride into a first-night front for its own kin, let alone for claimmen, that the steppe took what it took, that there would be survivors to fetch at dawn if the cards fell kind. All of it true, all of it sensible, all of it said while watching Wren steadily the way you watch a scale settle. The down skiff's locator pulse on Nim's handset, 70 kilometers out, getting weaker, 6 souls, and the wide second again, the one with room in it, the fear pouring past the setstone. They drew my blood and lied about what it was, Wren said, pulling her mother's cold mask out of the satchel. And there's still 6 people drowning in dirt, and I know where they are, and I have walked scaffolding in worse wind than this. Lend me a beast and a drag sled, or I'll walk it. You'll walk in circles and die 11 kilometers from my porch, Kath Irel said, and looked at her for the space of one long breath, and then turned and began shouting the clan's storm rig awake in her own language, because the scale had settled. Wren learned later, much later, what the headwoman had actually been waiting out there to decide, and it had nothing to do with sleds. The clans had a duty, 2 centuries old, written in the same coal script as everything else on this road. When a Marlowe came asking the way to the ring, the clan was to test what the asker would spend on someone who could pay them nothing back. Var had radioed the clans an offer of survey wages the day the corvette landed. Kath Irel had been deciding which petitioner her people worked for, and the dust front had decided it for her. They brought back 5 of the 6 alive. Wren rode drag on the second sled with a Combine inspector's broken body lashed against her own warmth the whole screaming way home, packed his mask seals with her bare hands when the grit cut them, lost the feeling in her face, lost the lamp's light entirely once, buried in a grit wave that rolled the sled, and saw it relight, underground under dirt, impossible, a coal-colored point burning through canvas and dust like the strap glyph through iron, showing the diggers where her hand was. The 6th soul was Watch Commander Courser, and he was alive too, because the wreck's one half-sheltered seat had had him in it. He had ordered the flight on. The steppe had heard him do it. He sat by the Withing House stove all the next day with his arm splinted in stone pine and his certainty splinted in nothing at all. Watching the claim jumper, he'd cordoned spoon broth into his own concussed pilot, and he said one thing only late. To no one in particular, in the voice of a man rereading his ledger and finding the figures changed, we'd have logged you as weather losses, if it were reversed. There's a form. At dawn on the 3rd day, the front blown out and the steppe rinsed gold, Wren came out onto the porch with the broth pot and found the tollhouse door standing open. No hand had touched it. The glyph above the lintel burned steady, coal-colored, nude-lit. The cold was gone out of the iron pull like fever gone out of a wrist. And inside, down the long hall her mother had kept, for 17 years the morning sun lay across swept stone and a bank stove and a wall of small wooden lockers. keeper after keeper after keeper, 200 years of them, and the locker at the end stood unlatched, with a folded map on top of it, and on the map in the drafting hand Ren knew like her own face, a route across the last of the steppe, and 3 words, now you know. The locker held the rest of her mother and 5 objects, a keeper's coat, oiled canvas, mended at the left elbow with stitches Ren recognized because she had been taught them at a kitchen table, a tin of stone pine resin, a clan-made knife, gift-wrapped in a scrap of wagon cloth and never used, with a tag in Cathirel's blunt script, for the girl Wen. A bound stack of unsent letters addressed 1 per year to Crane House, each one starting Ren, and stopping, none more than 3 lines in. 17 attempts at the impossible sentence, kept not because they were finished, but because stopping had apparently never once been clean. And at the bottom, wrapped in waxed cloth, the tollhouse's own ledger, with the last 17 years in her mother's hand. Ren read the final entry standing in the doorway light, while behind her Nim very quietly kept Courser and the other Combine survivors at the far end of the hall, and Cepha stood in the yard with her arms folded watching the north. Withing House, Day 6, 112 of this keeping. The Combine has found the resonance trick at last, confirmation today via the registrar's relay. 60 years of my family's lie has run out from under me, and what is left is arithmetic. They cannot open the ring with blood, but they can find it now, and finding it they will cut, and the ring will do against cutting what it has always done. And 100-some hired souls who believe they are opening a bank vault will be standing on the porch of a thing they have not been introduced to. The Emberline's whole purpose was to keep the wrong hands off that ground, and the wrong hands are coming, and I am one woman with a stove and a road. So last walk tomorrow, south porch, dawn side. If the ring will not take instruction, it never has, it may take testimony. I will stand where its witnesses can read me, and I will put my account in front of it until it answers or I am spent. The clans will bury me if it goes the way it may go. The ledger should record costs honestly. If the cost is everything, it was still cheap, set against the gilding signs on Moorhaven who will never have to stand here. Record, additionally, because a ledger is no place for a lie, I hope she never comes. I believe she would be equal to it. Both of those are true at once, and no one who has not kept a door will understand how. Ren stood with the ledger open until the words stopped swimming. Her mother had not died of an accident, or of the Combine, or even of the road. She had died the way a keeper banked a stove, deliberately, at dawn putting the last of her fuel where it would hold the cold off longest. And the ring had taken her testimony and kept it 3 seasons, and Ren knew that the way she knew the chart was warm. The door of the Withing House had not opened for a storm rescue alone. The road had been waiting to see if the line would send anyone to collect. Head woman, she said, going out into the yard. Her voice had changed. She heard it change, and so did everyone else. How fast can the wagons make the ring? Loaded 4 days. Kaith Irel squinted at her. Unloaded, with relays of beasts and no sleep worth the name. 2 why? Because her account is still sitting in front of that thing, waiting for someone to answer for it, Ren said. And the Combine is cutting on ground where the last keeper is buried, and I'm done walking behind this. I'd like to walk in front of it now. The head woman looked at her for the length of one breath, the scale settling again, and then turned and shouted the clan awake. What the Combine had built at the Sundermark in 6 days was a town. They came over the last rise at dusk of the 2nd day, and Ren saw it whole. The ring itself, stones the size of grain towers black against a bruised sky. The swollen ground inside them with its buried impossible heart, and around it, square kilometer on square kilometer of greywake order. Floodlight masts. Berm walls pushed up by blade crawlers. A landing apron with the Corvette and 9 lighters parked in a herringbone as neat as ledger column. Dormitory huts in rows. 2 cutting rigs the size of churches parked nose on to the southern arc of the ring, and a 3rd rig dead and half disassembled with scorch marks fanning out from it across 200 meters of grass, which told a story all by itself, because nothing in the Combine's town was generating scorch marks except the thing it had come to open. Nim read the camp through Sifa's glasses, lips moving over numbers. 3 watches, full perimeter, but the perimeter faces the steppe like a fence, not like a front. They're guarding against theft, not arrival. The dead rig, capacitor flashback. The ring grounded a cutting beam straight back up its own feed line. That's not damage, that's correspondence. Vars answering letters. She tracked left. A say pavilion at the south porch. That'll be where the vials are. South porch, Ren said. The dawn side. There are graves there, Kath Irel said low. Ours, mostly 200 years of ours. One of ours that's also yours. They've strung their pavilion lines straight across the burying ground because flat consecrated land reads as free. Real estate to a surveyor. She spat with precision downwind. The clans have sat quiet 6 days on Var's survey wages and watched it. Wages were clever. Hands that take wages don't reach for anything else. And the clan's duty, the one you tested me for in the storm, was to test and to witness and to bury, the headwoman said. Standing in front of it was never ours, girl. The line between tending a thing's porch and answering for the thing is the oldest line on this steppe. We don't cross it. We carry the ones who do. She nodded once at the floodlit town. We'll get you to the stones. They got her closer than that. The clan drove a stock string into the combine coordinate moonset. 40 beasts, deliberately spooked. An accident the steppe had been having on purpose for 200 years. And in the gap it tore in the watch pattern. 3 people went over the berm in the churned dark. Ren, Nim, and Sepha, with the long-barreled thing from the smuggle box that Ren had agreed not to ask about. They were inside the second wire before the stock was rounded, under the assay pavilion skirts before the floods re-steadied, and that was where the plan, which had been to reach the south porch quietly and let Ren stand her ground at the stones before anyone could decide. Otherwise, met the Combine's town and died, because the Vials were failing right now in front of an audience, and the audience was everyone. The pavilion's inner yard blazed like an operating theater. The 12 sample cases stood racked on a field altar of instrumentation at the foot of the southernmost stone, cabled into resonance horns aimed at the ring like siege equipment, and around this rig, in concentric arcs, stood what Ren took a moment to understand was the entire assay division not on perimeter watch. 100+ souls in gray, drawn up in rows, because Elex Var had ordered the opening of the Sundermark made a ceremony. He stood at the altar himself with one plated hand on the rack, and his voice rolled out over the kneeling instrumentation calm as a board meeting. Log it again, he was saying. Sequence 11, full gain. The horns sang. The vials lit, actually lit, the blood inside fluorescing that coalglyph color, and Ren felt the chart go hot against her back as every charted resonance for 100 kilometers answered the bell. And on the Great Southern, stone for the 11th time that night, glyphs woken away from grass to crown, the whole monolith igniting like a struck coal bed, and went dark. Not dead dark. Deliberate dark. The light withdrew the way a face withdraws from a window when it has seen who is knocking, and the instrumentation registered, Nim whispered, reading the spill of a text screen through the glasses. A single repeating response on a frequency the rig hadn't broadcast. One figure pulsed in old coal script, again and again, which the Combine's linguistics suite was rendering on every monitor in the yard with clinical helplessness, as no one is standing. 11 sequences, Var said into the silence to his 100 souls in rows, with the patience finally audibly costing him something. The samples answer. The structure answers. The structure acknowledges the Marlowe signature and then declines, which means the signature is necessary and not sufficient, which means the amber eyes lifted and crossed the yard and found her between 2 pavilion skirts in the churned dark, exactly the way they had found her in the stairwell of Crane House, and not one plate of his face moved. The remainder of the key has just delivered itself. Lights. The floods came around. Sepha's long barrel came up, 40 lances came out, and Ren put her hand flat on Sepha's gun and pushed it down because the arithmetic of the yard was beyond all that, and stepped out into the white light alone with her hands shown empty. Miss Marlowe, Elex Var said, you walked. I'm impressed. The dust front cost me a skiff. Come and stand where my consultants tell me a Marlowe needs to stand. Put your living hand where 11 generations of stored samples cannot quite reach, and the Combine will write your name into the recovery of the age at a founder's share. Refuse, and I'll be candid with you, as I have been candid throughout. I am holding 140 contracts that all pay out on an open door, a ruinous quarter's costs, 3 berm loads of increasingly philosophical employees, and a structure that grounds cutting beams back up their own feed lines. You are the last polite option on my books. I am asking you, formally and in front of the division's recorders, stand at the stone. And here was the thing Ren had learned on the road that the broker, for all his patience, had not. She agreed with him. Not about shares, not about doors, about her. She was the last polite option, the remainder of the key. He had only mistaken what the key was made of, the way his Combine had mistaken it for 60 years, because the truth had been kept by people who paid for the keeping. I'll stand at the stone, Ren said. The yard exhaled. Var's plated head tilted 1 degree, recalculating. Too easy, the tilt said. But not for the Combine, and not at your altar. She raised her bandaged hand and pointed past it, past the cables strung across the burying ground, to the unmarked cairn on the dawn side that she had recognized the moment the floods came around, the way she'd have recognized her own bed in the dark. Your pavilion is staked through a graveyard. Broker, the last keeper of this door is lying under your power cabling. I'm going to stand where she stood, at dawn when this stone's witnesses can read me, and I'm going to answer for her account, and your recorders are welcome at it, because the one thing this road has taught me is that everything true on it gets logged. She lowered her hand. Until dawn you can do what you like. You can bleed me again, it'll find you nothing you haven't found. You can put lances on me. Your watch commander can tell you what your contracts are worth the moment one of them fires on the keeper's heir in front of the door you're asking to open. Or you can do the genuinely intelligent thing, the hedge, the house style. Clear your cables off the graves, stand your people back to the berm and let the spare key turn itself and see what it cost you. Nothing. It cost you nothing, Var. I'm not racing you anymore. There's no race. There's a door, and there's what doors like this read, and at dawn I'm going to let it read me. And the only choice you actually own tonight is what it sees you doing while it does. Silence, under the floods, 140 contracts deep. Then watch Commander Corsair, flown back from the Withing House with his splinted arm and his resealed credentials and his changed figures, stepped out of the second rank, crossed to the burying ground, took hold of the first power cable staked across the graves and pulled it up. He didn't say anything. He coiled it, moved to the next stake, pulled that. After a moment, 2 of the rescued skiff crew broke ranks and started on the pavilion's southern guys. Then a 4th person moved, and a 5th, and Ilex Var stood at his instrument altar in the middle of his own ceremony, watching the division's order reorganize itself around a thing that didn't appear anywhere on his books. And being, above all else, a broker, he did what brokers do with a market turning. He turned with it, smooth as gloves. "Clear the south porch," he announced, as if it had been his next line all along. "Recorders on full. The Combine extends every professional courtesy to the Marlowe claimant pending the dawn assay." The amber eyes held Wren's across the yard, patient as ever, and somewhere behind them the other arithmetic, the contracts and the costs and the philosophical employees, ran on. "And re-rack the samples," he added softly to his own techs. "All 12, the Combine hedges. They gave her the night, and she spent the heart of it where she had been walking toward since the attic at Crane House, sitting on her heels at an unmarked cairn on the dawn side of the Sundermark, with the flood stood down to working lights, and the great stones black against the starfield, and the cold coming up out of the ground like the cold off the tollhouse door. She didn't try to say all of it. She was her mother's daughter. The ledger should record costs honestly, and the honest record was that no words were the right size. She told the cairn about the crate, and the cut, and the registrar keeping count of her 41 climbs. She told it about the lamp lighting in the archive, and what the warm second was like from inside, the room in it, the water going past the stone. She read aloud by emberlight the first lines of all 17 unsent letters, because somebody finally should. And at the end she took out the clan knife, for the girl Wen, and cut the last keeper's mark into the cairn's shoulder stone where 200 years of marks looked north toward the door, an A and an M in her own sign cutter's letter forms, deep and clean and meant to outlast weather. "You didn't fail anything," she told her mother, the second time in her life she'd said it aloud. And behind her, in the dark, the southernmost stone of the Sundermark lit one single glyph, low down, at the height of a kneeling woman's eyes, and held it lit, like a lamp left on in a window until the sky went gray. Nim found her there an hour before dawn, hunkered down beside the cairn with 2 cups of clan tea and her 4 eyes full of bad news. "He's hedging," she said. "I've been counting power draws all night the way he taught his appraisers to count everything, and the camp's books don't balance. The 2 intact cutting rigs are showing cold on every public monitor, banked, stood down, professional courtesy, exactly as announced. Except the camp's reactor is running 6 points over what a stood-down camp draws. And there's a feed trench they cut yesterday that goes under the berm and comes up nowhere on the site plan." She blew on her tea without drinking it. "I found where it comes up. The dead rig, Wren. The one the ring burned. They've spent 2 nights gutting it for parts under tarps, not to fix it. To strip its capacitor bank into the other 2. Var's not planning to cut after your stand fails. He's planning to cut during it. Both rigs, full stored charge, 1 pulse. While the door is doing whatever doors like this do when they're reading someone while it's open, in whatever way it opens, even a crack, even its attention. The consultants told him attention is an aperture. You're not his spare key anymore. You're his knock on the door, and the rigs are his foot." Wren looked at the great stone with its 1 lamp glyph burning at kneeling height, and found that she wasn't surprised, and was distantly sorry about that the road had worn the surprise offer somewhere between Moorhaven and here. "How long to charge?" "They've been at it 2 nights. By dawn they'll have everything the dead rig held." Nim's hands tightened on the cup, all 4. "There's more and it's worse, and you need to hear it from me before you hear it happening. He's moved the survey, wage herders. 12 of them, the youngest hands are from the 2 clans that took his coin, reassigned at midnight to instrument tending, 6 at the foot of each rig. They're cabling sensor pylons that don't connect to anything. They're collateral, Wren." Vars read the same storm report Corsair filed. "He knows exactly what you'll spend for people who can't pay you back, and he has placed his people accordingly." If the ring grounds those rigs back up their own feed lines the way it did the first one, with the capacitor banks brimmed. She didn't finish. The scorch fan across 200 meters of grass finished it for her. He doesn't think he's murdering them, Ren said slowly, working it through, because it mattered the way it had mattered on the archive floor. He's priced it. If the door opens for me, his pulse rides in and his contracts pay, and the pylons were just pylons. If the door grounds the pulse, he loses 2 rigs and 12 wage hands and bills it as my failed assay. The Marlowe claimant's catastrophic. Interference. He wins on both pages of the book. He thinks he does. Nim set the tea down untouched on the cairn's foot like an offering. He's wrong, and I can't prove it, and that's what frightens me. I've assayed this ring for 6 days from inside his camp. It's not a vault with a temper, whatever the consultants priced it as. It grounded that first beam gently, Ren. I ran the energy figures 4 times. It could have sent that pulse back as one coherent return and turned the rig crew to weather. It shows a flashback that scorched grass and broke a machine and burned not one soul. It's been answering a siege with patience for 6 days. All 4 eyes came up to hers. Things that patient aren't passive. They're waiting for something specific, and every record on this road says the something walks in on 2 feet and stands still. Whatever happens at dawn, it happens through you. So whatever you're going to be out there, be it on purpose. Var came to the burying ground an hour after Nim left, alone, on foot, unarmed, which was its own kind of statement, and stood at the edge of the swept gravel like a man observing a property line. Because he was. Your mother sold me the Telleran chart herself, he said without preamble, to her back. Did you know that? Most of the forgeries came through cutouts, brokers, but the 12th she delivered personally. A rented office on Coriat Station 11 years ago. She wore a surveyor's pin she had no right to anymore, and she charged me a price so far past reason that the size of it became the authentication. Nobody, my assessors ruled, would dare ask that much for paper unless the paper was real. I sat across a table from her for 2 hours, Miss Marlowe, while she walked me through the route that would burn 4 ships in her own name, and my division's instruments read her pulse the entire time, and they recorded nothing. Not one flutter. I have negotiated with sovereign banks that showed more fear. The amber eyes in the dark were 2 patient coals. I have thought about those 2 hours for 11 years. I priced her as the best liar I had ever audited. It has been occurring to me since the archive, slowly, expensively, that she may not have been lying at all in the way that matters. She believed every word of what she was selling me. She had simply decided what her life was for, and the chart was part of the spending. There is no instrument in the Combine's inventory that can read that condition. It presents as calm. It's called standing, Ren said. She didn't turn around. You've been camped in front of the biggest instrument in the Reach for 6 days, broker. It reads nothing else. So your registrar implied at length. He was quiet a moment. The wind moved the grass out beyond the stones. I came to make the last offer because my books require it of me, and because, credit where it is owed, you have been the only honest counterparty in this entire acquisition. Here it is. Walk away tonight. Not for shares. I misjudged that. You're not for sale. Your mother wasn't either. The file is updated. Walk away because of what happens at dawn if your stand fails. You believe the door reads courage, perhaps. But I am 140 contracts deep in a quarter I cannot survive empty-handed. And a broker at the end of his arithmetic is a worse animal than a broker at the start of it. And if that stone refuses you in front of my recorders, then whatever I do next gets billed to necessity, and necessity, Miss Marlowe, has no manners at all. I have seen the kind of mourning that follows. I have invoiced for it. I do not especially want to invoice for this one. The plated head inclined 1 degree. Your mother's daughter does not strike me as a woman who needs the danger explained twice. That is the offer. Safety in exchange for absence. It expires at first light. Ren looked at the 1 lit glyph on the great southern stone, burning steady at kneeling height, and found that her heart wasn't even going hard. The road had spent her fear somewhere across the steppe, and what was left in its place was a craftsman's irritation at being interrupted while the leaf hung balanced. You met her for 2 hours and you've audited her for 11 years, she said. So you tell me, if she'd taken your offer, any offer ever, the smart one, the safe one, would the thing behind me have lit 1 mark above her grave? The silence went long. Out in the camp the feed lines hummed. Underground 2 centuries deep, something patient kept its own books. No, Var said at last, and the word came out of him at cost like a vial pressed against stone and finding it blind. It would not. Then you have my answer, and you had it before you walked out here. Absence isn't a thing I have left to sell, broker. She spent it. Ren settled back on her heels in front of the cairn, her mother's coat around her shoulders, the dawn side of the sundermark above her like a held verdict. Go balance your books. At first light, watch the instrument. He stood a moment longer at the property line of the swept gravel. Then he did something the recorders never explained to anyone's satisfaction, and that Ren never told anyone but Sepha. He bowed, the full formal incline of his species, plate over plate, a creditor acknowledging a debt the ledgers had no column for, and walked back into his floodlit arithmetic, and did not look back. Dawn on the Hollis steppe came up like a verdict, no clouds, the sky going iron, then ash rose, then a clean merciless gold along the eastern grass, and the Sundermark stood black against it with its 12 outer stones in a 2-kilometer crown, and the swollen ground inside them seemed, in that light, very slightly too still, the way a held breath is still. The combine turned out in full. Because Var had made it a ceremony again, recorders en masse, the division in arcs behind the re-racked sample altar, the 2 cutting rigs nose on to the southern arc, with their tarps off and their feed lines humming in a register Ren could feel in her teeth, and 12 young herders in borrowed gray tabards standing at the rig skirts beside pylons that connected to nothing, looking small. Sepha stood at the berm with the clan, Kath Irel beside her, the head woman's face a closed door. Courser had the south watch. The splinted arm was out of the sling, which it shouldn't have been. He had put himself, Ren noticed, at the exact midpoint between the rigs and the burying ground, a man standing on the line in his own ledger. Elex Var met her at the edge of the cleared porch, gloves on, the rising light sliding off his slate plating, and the courtesy in him was bottomless, and the arithmetic behind his amber eyes was finished. Miss Marlowe, the Combine's recorders are live, its courtesies extended, its samples racked in support of your assay. Whenever you're ready. Pull the herders back first. The instrument crews are where the instruments are, Var said, mild as milk, and there it was, the whole man. He would not even do her the honor of a lie she could fight. The Combine does not redeploy on a claimant's sentiment. It's not sentiment. Your consultants told you attention is an aperture, and you've pointed 2 charged rigs at the aperture. The thing on the other side of it has been gentle 6 days. I'm asking you to be worth the gentleness. Noted for the record, Var said, and declined. Walk well, Miss Marlowe, I'm told that's the expression. So Ren Marlowe walked out onto the south porch of the Sundermark alone, in her mother's mended coat, with the ember at her chest and the dead lamp burning at her hip, across ground her family had been buying back from catastrophe for 60 years, between graves on her right hand and siege engines on her left, and she understood with every step what the road had been doing to her the whole way out from Moorhaven, the attic, the 40 steps, the lance in the archive, the cold door, the storm, the cairn. None of them had been tests in the way the Combine assayed things, pass and fail, key and lock. They had been practice. The road did not test its keepers. It trained them, wide second by wide second, stone by stone, until standing still in front of the unsurvivable was not a decision anymore but a craft, learned in the hands like gilding, and the only decision left was who you did it for. She stopped at the foot of the great southern stone, where the grass gave way to 2 centuries of swept gravel, on the spot her mother had died holding, and she did not put her hand on the stone, and she did not kneel, and she did not say any of the 41 things she had drafted in the night. She turned around. She put her back to the door the whole galaxy wanted, and she faced the rigs and the herders and the 140 contracts and the recorders and the rising sun, and she stood still with her hands shown empty at her sides, their ground, her head, in that order. I'm not going to open it, she said, into the recorders, into the humming, across the porch to where Var's plated head had gone perfectly motionless. That's the assay result, broker, logged in front of your whole division. The Marlowe claimant, at the door, with every key you believe in running in her veins, declines. It was never mine to open. It was ours to stand in front of. And I'm the last of that, and I'm standing. You want the door, you don't need vials, and you don't need rigs. You just need to come and move me. For 3 heartbeats, the step made no sound but the feed lines. Then Elex Var, broker of record, did the cheapest arithmetic of his long career and said one word quietly into his collar, cut. 3 things happened inside the next second, and the ember against Ren's sternum recorded all of them for a registry older than the city of Dross, and none of them was the thing Var had priced. The first, Watch Commander Courser, standing at the midpoint of his own ledger, drew his lance, turned it sideways, gripped it 2-handed like a fence rail, and walked into the feed trench. Into it, boots on the cabling, his body and his issued weapon and his 22 years of certified service physically in the line where the trench came shallow. Shouting at the herder children, flat-voiced, by name, the names learned in a storm, off the skirts behind me now, and the 6 nearest him ran. The second, a gray-coated appraiser, 4th grade formerly, came over the berm on the rig side where she had absolutely not been authorized to be, with 4 hands full of pulled junction pins, having spent the ceremony field stripping the starboard rig's discharge sequencer the way she'd once promised she could field strip anything, and the starboard rig's hum died with a sound like a dropped book. And the third, the port rig, fired. Ren saw it as light first, the world going coal-white from behind her shadow thrown 200 meters long across the gravel and the graves, every blade of steppe grass etched separate and black. And she had one full wide second, the widest of her life, with all the room in the world in it, to understand that the beam was not aimed at her. It was aimed past her, over her, at the aperture, at the attention, at the ancient open regard of the thing her family had served, and that the 6 remaining herders at the port rig's skirt were standing inside the fan of whatever came back, and that she could be out of the return path in 4 strides, because she was a Marlowe and the road had told her where its doors kept their hinges. She didn't take the strides. She took 1 step, toward the rig, toward the children, putting herself square in the line between the port rig skirts and the great stones, grounded answer, and she planted her feet on her mother's ground, and she raised her open hands against a sky on fire, not to block it. There was no blocking it. The way you raise your hands at a scaffold mate about to step back off the edge. "Stand still," she roared at the herders. "With everything in her, it won't cross me." She had no way to know that. She knew it anyway. It was the only sentence of pure faith she had ever spoken in her life, and the Sundermark, which had been waiting 200 years for exactly this shape of second, made it true. The return came down the beam path like a tide going the wrong way, and parted around her. She stood in a forked river of coal-colored fire with her hands raised and her boots on swept gravel that did not even grow warm, and the grounded pulse poured past her on both sides close enough to braid the loose hair off her brow, and where it passed it did not strike the herders, did not strike Courser in his trench, did not strike one living soul on the whole south porch. It gathered, curving, every thread of it bending around the standing woman like current around a set stone, and went home into the port rig's own capacitor bank with the precise, unhurried competence of a craftsman returning a borrowed tool. The rig did not explode. It sat down, its skirts buckled, its mast folded, its brimmed banks discharged downward into its own frame, and 50 tons of siege engine knelt into the steppe in a fan of harmless sparks and was, audibly and permanently, scrap. The light cleared. The steppe rang with silence. Ren stood in the middle of a scorch pattern shaped exactly like a parted river. 2 black fans and 1 clean unburned aisle of gravel, 1 woman wide running from the rig's grave straight back to the foot of the southern stone, and her raised hands were steady, and the lamp at her hip was burning like a small sun. Behind her the Sundermark spoke, not in the linguistic suite's helpless clinical rendering, not on a frequency. It spoke in air, in a voice that came from the stones in the ground and the swept gravel and the held breath of the buried hill, all at once, vast and old and plain, like the largest patience in the world deciding it was finished being only patience. And it said, "She said you would stand." Every glyph on every stone of the 2-kilometer crown, ignited at once, grass to crown, 12 towers of woken coal script burning against the morning, and the swollen ground inside the ring exhaled 2 centuries of stillness in a long seismic sigh that rolled out under every boot on the porch. The witnesses stepped back, all of them, everywhere, one involuntary pace. The division in its arcs, the techs at the altar, the clan at the berm. 140 contracts and 200 years of tending, all stepping back at once from the thing standing up in the middle of the world, while one sign restorer from Moorhaven stood her ground at the door of it, with her hands still raised, shaking now, and laughed once, a short, cracked, unceremonial sound, her mother's exact laugh, the one for jobs that came out true. "Her account is answered," the Sundermark said, in its voice of stones. "Her watch is ended, witnessed, recorded, and kept. Ren Marlowe, daughter of the last keeper. Restorer of letters. You were told the truth on this road. Blood has never opened me. Blood was only ever the address. I opened for the thing your line was merely fortunate enough to keep producing, and produces in you. Courage is the inheritance. You stood between the smallest of them and the fire with nothing in your hands. The door is yours if you will carry it." And the great southern stone, the whole 80-meter monolith, seamless since before her species had written its first word anywhere, split from grass to crown along a line of light and opened. What stood open was not a vault mouth. It was a doorway, person-sized, lamplit from within, cut to the scale of a kitchen door or a tollhouse door or the door of Crane House, with worn treads going down, a door built, unmistakably, deliberately for one ordinary human being at a time to walk through on their own 2 feet. And warm air came up out of it, carrying, impossibly, across 200 years, the smell of a banked stove. Ren lowered her hands. The porch behind her was bedlam held in a held breath, and into it, before she took the first tread, the ring's voice rolled one last time over the whole camp, addressed to everyone, pitched like a registrar's notice. "The following is logged. 2 stood between the fire and the small without price, the watch commander in the trench, the appraiser at the sequencer. The door does not forget what it reads. They may enter, now or in any year of their lives, as guests of the watch. The broker of record holds 11 generations of stolen address in glass. The door has read the broker for 6 days. A pause, and the patience in the vast voice thinned to something with an edge of geology under it. The door declines. Across the porch, in front of his own live recorders, HFY took the master vial from the rack with steady gloved hands, 12 generations of combined certainty in a sample case, and walked to the burning stone of the northern arc, the far side, away from the woman and the open door, and pressed the glass against the woken glyphs of the Sundermark. The glyphs went out, just there, just around the vial, a neat circle of dark in the coal fire, the exact diameter of his hand, the stone going blind at his touch like a face withdrawing from a window, and they stayed out while he stood there, and the fire burned on above and below and around the dark circle, and that was all. No anger, no grounding pulse, nothing to fight, nothing to bill, nothing to file against. The oldest door in the reach of human roads simply, in front of every recorder his own ceremony had demanded, declined to know him. He stood a long moment, plated and patient and perfectly alone. Then Watch Commander Courser climbed out of the feed trench, took the credentials off his own coat, and laid them on the altar among the instruments. The 2 skiff crew survivors did the same, then a rig tech, then a row of them. Nim Socha stood on the berm with her hands full of junction pins and watched the Greyway Combine's assay division resign by lamplight in the middle of the steppe, contract by contract, the chits clicking down onto the altar like hail on a roof. And HFY watched it too, doing visibly the only arithmetic left to him, which was the price of being the one creature on the porch that the door had looked at and seen nothing standing. Wren turned her back on all of it, the second time that morning, and went down the worn treads into the warm. The stair went down a long way, and it was a human stair the whole way. Rope-smoothed handrail, treads hollowed by feet, little wall niches where keepers across 2 centuries had left the kind of things people leave in places they trust. A clay cup, a child's carved beast, a folded cap, a tin whistle. The lamp at her hip lit each niche as she passed and let it go dark behind her, and the warm bread smell of banked heat rose to meet her, and the ember on its cord pulsed slow and content against her breastbone, like a heart that had gotten where it was going. Then the stair opened out, and Wren Marlowe stood on a gallery rail at the top of the inside of the world and saw the furnace. No record, no registrar's ember picture, no ledger had made her ready for the size. The buried hill was a roof, and under the roof the Sundermark went down and out farther than Moorhaven's whole port valley, casting floors like plains, feed throats like canyon mouths, gantries that were themselves the size of orbital docks, all of it lit not by floods but by the same patient coal light as everything on the road, glowing up out of channels in the floors as if the building's veins ran banked fire. And in the cradles, hanging in stasis fields like patients on tables, exactly as the registrar's picture had promised, the half-born shapes, the ribs of an arc hull, miles of it, frozen mid-pour 200 years ago. A habitat ring like a city bent into a wedding band. Soil frames stacked to the haze of the ceiling, each one a farm valley waiting to be dealt out onto some dead world like a card. It could cast a city in a season. It could knit a dead world's soil. It had spent 11 days once being the other thing, and then a line of stubborn ordinary people had decided, hand over hand for 200 years, that nobody, not enemy, not employer, not government, not their own grandchildren, was going to get the chance to make it the other thing again, and had paid for that decision in the only currency that had ever opened this door. "You are reading my cradles," the Sundermark said. Down here its voice was smaller, closer, a presence at her shoulder rather than a sky. Everyone who comes down the stair reads them differently. The brokers read inventory. The marshals read armament. Your mother the first time stood where you are standing and read debt. All the worlds I was built to mend and have not been allowed to mend because mending requires opening, and opening requires trusting, and the species that built me spent my trust in 11 days. A channel of coal light brightened along the gallery, leading. Come. She left you something in my keeping, and the law of the watch is that it be given before anything else is said. Business before grief was her phrasing. She knew you would come down the stair angry at me, and she wanted the first voice you heard at the bottom of the world to be hers. "I'm not angry at you," Wren said, following the light. "You are?" the Sundermark said gently. "I am the thing she chose over watching you grow up. You have been angry at me since the attic, under everything. The way grief is angry. It is the correct reading of the record, Wren Marlowe, and I will not insult either of you by arbitrating it. She made the same choice every keeper makes, and it cost what it costs. And the door does not pretend the price is small just because the freight is the world." The light brought her to a small room off the gallery, and it was a room, a keeper's room, stone snug, with a stove and a cot and a desk, and 200 years of names cut into the doorframe. And on the desk, squared with the edge like everything her mother had ever owned. One last object, not a letter. A sign. A shop sign. Hand-sized, old wood. The paint gone, but the carved letters clean under 2 centuries of hands. The Withing House, kept road. All walkers weather welcome. And below the words, where a sign maker would put their chop, a smaller line of coal glyphs, and Wren found she could read them now, the way she'd been able to read the journal since the archive. Pay match to pay. The glyph said, restoration wanted. Apply within. She was still holding it when her mother's voice came on. It came from the room itself, the way the registrar's voice came from the hall, recorded, the Sundermark told her later, the way the door recorded everything done in front of it, kept whole in stone for 3 seasons against this exact morning, and it was not the drafting table voice of the journal, nor the press pinhole voice of the chart. It was just her mother, tired late at night, sitting in this chair, talking to a daughter she knew she would never see again. Wren, it's the last night, and the door says I'm allowed one unfair thing, so here it is. I'm not going to apologize. I chose the road. I choose it again. And you deserve better than a lie about that, and there is no version of this speech where both of us come out whole, so let the record be honest, the way I taught you. Here's what's true. Every door I kept with your face in front of me. Every storm I rode out in a coat you'd have laughed at. And every single time the road asked me what I was, at the steps, at the tollhouse, at the stone, what I held up to be read, the thing in me the doors actually opened for was never my nerve, baby, it was yours. 9 years old on a scaffold, furious, teaching your own mother to slow down. Mind the leaf, it only tears when you rush. The watch I kept was just your patience grown old. So if you're hearing this, then the door has read you for itself and found what I always knew was there, and I want you to understand exactly what that means. Because the Combine never did, and half the Emberline never did either. It was never our blood the road wanted, Wren. Blood was the envelope. You were the letter. You, exactly you, the way you are. And any child of any world who learns to hold still in the wide second the way you hold gold leaf. That's the whole secret. That's what I died keeping the wrong hands away from. Not the furnace. The truth about the key. Because the day the Combines of the galaxy learn that the door opens for ordinary courage, they will start farming ordinary courage, and caging it, and bleeding it 12 vials at a time, and that. The recorded voice steadied itself, the old, dry kitchen table steel coming back into it. That, the watch exists to prevent. So, last instruction from your mother, and then I'm done instructing you forever, I promise. Don't keep the door the way I kept it. I kept it like a secret, and secrets eat their keepers, and they eat their keepers' daughters' childhoods. And I am looking at the arithmetic of my life tonight, and I do not like the page. Keep it like a sign, Wren. You restore signs. You take a thing the weather has beaten until nobody can read it anymore, and you put it back where everyone can see what it always said. The road is 200 years overdue for a keeper who works in gold leaf instead of cipher. The clans are owed open thanks. The registrar is owed a holiday. Ask it about the holiday. It will pretend not to understand. It has been pretending not to understand for 900 years. And the Ark and Cradle one is owed a destination. The door knows which world. Make them finish what they were pouring when the wars came. All my love, all of it, every single day of it, including the silent ones. Especially the silent ones. Mind the leaf, my girl. The watch is yours if you want it. The recording ended. The stove ticked. Somewhere out on the casting plains, a stasis cradle sang one low harmonic like a struck bowl. Wren sat down in her mother's chair at the bottom of the world with the little sign in both hands and stayed there a while. The door, which had kept 200 years of human moments and knew the worth of an unwatched one, dimmed the room's coal light to stove glow, and said nothing at all for a long time, and that was the kindest thing anything had done for her since Moorhaven. Then she wiped her face with the heel of her bandaged hand, and stood, and went back out onto the gallery where the half-born Ark hung in its cradle, over the plains of patient fire, and she asked the oldest relic on the human road the question her mother had built her whole masterpiece, never expecting anyone to ask it. What do you want? The coal light ran out along the gantries and the casting floors and the cradle rails, kilometer on kilometer, the whole buried world brightening by one breath, the way a face brightens. 200 years, the Sundermark said, and every soul down that stair has told me what they wanted. Inventory, armament, absolution. Your mother, bless her ledger, wanted instructions. You are the first to ask, so I will tell you, and then the watch may begin honestly. The vast voice came down very quietly then, quiet as a kitchen, quiet as a bank stove. I was built to mend worlds, and I have spent 2 centuries as a buried sword instead, because that was the only safe shape the age allowed me. I am tired of being a sword, Wren Marlowe. I want what every retired soldier on every porch on the Hollis steppe wants. I want to do the work I was made for, with witnesses I trust, slowly, properly, without one hand on the hilt. I want the Cradle One arc finished and poured and sent, with children stamping their boots on its decks. I want the ember line above my door in daylight. I want, in the deepest place a made thing keeps its wanting, I want to be a forge again. And the law of my own making says I may be exactly as much of one as the courage standing at my door can answer for. The light gathered, warm, at the rail where her hands rested. So the question returns to its rightful owner, keeper. What do you want? And Wren, who had walked the whole road thinking she was walking toward a duty, found the answer already in her hands. Carved by some signmaker 200 years dead, plain as paint. Restoration wanted, apply within. I want to open at dawn, she said. What came after took years, and the years are the point. So the record keeps them brief and bright, the way a ledger keeps a good era. The Greywake Combine's claim on the Sundermark died on its own paper. Nim Socha, appraiser, forthwith formally. Recorder of the watch, presently and for the rest of her long life, filed the counter-instrument herself, four-handed with visible joy. A salvage claim requires an abandoned asset, and the asset in question had opened its door, declared a keeper, and registered itself with the registrar of the Lantern Archive as an operating concern, a working forge under the law of the oldest registry in the Reach. The claim didn't lose, it evaporated. Ilex Var lifted off the step three days after the dawn assay with a third of the personnel he'd landed with. A written censure from his own division's resigned watch commander entered into the public record, and a sample case of 11 generations of Marlowe blood that had become, by the door's own broadcast finding, 11 generations of evidence of theft. The Combine, being the Combine, survived. Brokers always survive. But it survived the way the steppe let things survive. Smaller, downwind, and known. The last anyone on the road heard of Var, he was brokering water rights on a moon nobody could find on a chart without help. And the clans, who forgot nothing, sent him one wagon cloth parcel a year, freight prepaid, an empty vial, swept clean, and a small card in blunt script reading "Nothing is standing." Courser stayed. He never went down the stair. Guests of the watch, he said, should owe their welcome a little longer than 3 days, but he stood the doors south, watched through that first winter as the watch's first hired warden, trained the next 6, married into the Eastern clan whose children he had called off the rig skirts by name, and was buried decades on the dawn side, 2 cairns north of a woman he'd met once in a stairwell and arrested his whole life to apologize to. The door logged every year of it. Cepha Oren got a new boat. The furnace poured the keel as its first commission in 200 years, a freighter hull of the old arc metal, absurd, indestructible, the envy of 3 systems. And Cepha flew the kept roads in it for the rest of her flying days, hauling the watch's freight and the clan's wool, and twice a year, one passenger from Moorhaven, the probate assessor, who had sold Crane House's debts to a buyer nobody could trace and never once asked the right question about it, because the buyer had been the registrar, and the registrar's tolls are paid in freight, and what the archive wanted from Crane House was for the attic to stay exactly as it was. A blood door rusting shut unused on a quiet street, pointing at no one. Some records are kept by keeping them empty. The Lantern Archive got its holiday. Wren asked, the way her mother told her to, and the registrar pretended not to understand, the way her mother promised it would. And then one morning the Veshet scholars arrived at the 40 steps to find the chain down, the slate wiped, and one line of fresh chalk in 5 languages, closed for the day. The registrar is reading for pleasure. It became an annual scandal. The scholars planned for it like a festival, and the Ark and Cradle One was finished. That was the work of the 4th and 5th years. The furnace pouring, singing down its mile-long floors while the steppe came to the berm to listen. The resigned division retrained as casting crews. The clan's young hands, the same 12 the rigs had nearly spent, apprenticed to soil frames and learning to deal out farm valleys like cards. The door knew which world, and it was dross. The Ark went up off the steppe on a midsummer dawn with its decks stamped full of children, and 8 years later the canyon city of scar tissue had a green river valley growing down its center, and the municipality that had been too poor to clear its burned district built, with its first surplus in a century, a copy of 40 black steps, leading up to a garden, for no reason anyone could file except that the city had wanted at last to sweep something on purpose. The truth about the key stayed kept and stayed working. That was the part Wren built herself, her own masterpiece. Gilded over 17 years the way her mother's had been ciphered over 17. The watch hiring not by blood but by road, the way it always secretly had. The Withing House reopened under its restored sign. She did the restoration herself, gold leaf on 200-year-old letters, taking a full month over it, minding every edge. And it kept road for all walkers in all weather, and some of the walkers, every year a few, the ones who stood still in their own wide seconds when the steppe asked them its questions, found the road keeping them back. A herder girl who went into a flooded wash after a stranger's stock. A combine deserter who took a beating rather than name the family that hid him. A Veshet copyist, Nim's own apprentice, who stood between a press gang and the archive trays with nothing in her hands but a brush. The doors read them, one by one, and opened one by one, and the Emberline grew the only way it had ever grown. By witness, by deed, by the patient farming of the one crop the combines of the galaxy never did learn to bleed into a vial. Ren Marlowe kept the door 31 years, and kept it like a sign. She was at the Withing House the morning the roads count came due, an old keeper by then to everyone but herself, gray at the temples, her mother's coat remended at both elbows, teaching a clan 10-year-old to lay gold leaf on the porch table while the kettle worked itself up to opinions. The child rushed and tore the leaf and was furious, and Ren heard herself say it, "Mind the leaf. It only tears when you rush," and stopped, struck still, feeling the whole circle close, soft as a seam, drinking 3 drops. Out on the south road, Heat Shimmer stood up off the grass and resolved into a traveler, a young man, dusty footsore, jaw set, carrying a satchel like a question, some bondsman's son off a world she'd never visited, following a folded chart that had gone warm in his hands at his own father's wake, the way the road's invitations did now, finding their people the new way, by deed of kin, by courage in the family, wherever the family got it. He stopped at the foot of the porch steps, showed his empty hands, touched the ground, dusted his forehead, their ground, his head, in that order, learned from who knew which retelling, gotten slightly wrong, done anyway. "I'm looking for the keeper," he said. I'm sorry. This sounds mad. I think a door found me." Ren Marlowe set down the kettle and looked at him the way a scale settles, and smiled her mother's smile, the one for jobs about to come out true. "It does that," she said. "Come in off the road, petitioner, mind the step. You're expected. You have been for 200 years. Sit down, drink your tea, and let's see what you're carrying." Behind her, low against the doorframe where it had burned without fuel and without fail through 31 winters of kept road, the small flame of an old brass lamp stood up a little straighter, and away north under the steppe, in the warm heart of the world, the watch went on.